Well, awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Matt. Good to see you all. I see a few familiar names. Yeah, I've met some of you through whether it be the Institute or I've just come for different visits. I know we've done UNO campus a few times, Kearney we've done before, Lincoln, done a couple Zoom calls too. So appreciate the invitation back. So like what Matt said, I would love interaction on this. So if you've got questions or things don't make sense, just unmute yourself and go ahead and interrupt. There's going to be some pieces that I love to maybe hear a little bit of feedback. And then also, I think that we've got a chat box going too. So if you want to respond through there, we'll try and keep an eye on that. And Matt, if I don't respond to those, if you don't mind, butting into, that's great. So super informal. So, anyways, glad that you all have me. Brett Burchett. I'm actually located over in Lincoln, and am a financial advisor by trade. Um, so a little bit just about me before I hop into some of the content on retirement planning. So a lot of people ask, what in the world are all these weird letters after my name? I like to call it alphabet soup. So you can join me in with that one. So really what a few of them are: certified financial planner. That is just the industry peak credential for financial planning. That is one that we always recommend. If you work with someone or if you refer those to work with someone, try and look for that credential there. Another one, certified kingdom advisor. That one is focused on the intersection of faith and finance and where that really meets. And so that one is one I'm very proud to have. Credit investment fiduciary. That's more so that the big F word we talk about in this industry, fiduciary. Making sure you're doing what's in the best interest of the client. So that one is very investment focused, as well as certified plan fiduciary advisor. So those two are very similar. So a lot of letters. So bear with me on that. So FP Wealth Management is our company. We are a team of 12 people. So 4 advisors and 8 backbone team members, I call them, because we cannot operate without those other 8. We serve 1,500 households throughout 43 states, and we manage about $600 million of client assets. We advise probably close to about $1 billion, but what we actually manage is at 600 million. And I like to focus on this idea of comprehensive financial planning. So what that means is it's really taking every aspect of life together to create a plan for you. Financial just happen to be, I guess, the resources that you use to empower your life goals. So financial planning, I really like this definition of it, and you'll see some of it in our discussion today on retirement planning, if you can see on this chart. But the idea of financial planning, and whenever I bring that up, is collaborative process. So not just me or not just you, but it's collaborative to maximize potential for meeting life goals. Right? It's through financial advice. So I really like those two pieces there: collaborative and life goals. Because if we look around here, every single person probably has different goals, aspirations, values, financial resources, different family dynamics. Different. If you're married, your spouse might be a teacher, might work somewhere else, might have their own business. There's so many pieces that come together for this life plan. So retirement planning is a piece of that, and that's the one we're going to focus on today. So for some of you who have seen a presentation of mine before, you've probably seen this. But what I like to show is the idea of your priorities over different life stages are changing. So want to really be thinking through, and we'll start at age 20. So I'd love to hear maybe some thoughts. What would you say are some life priorities in your 20s? And anyone can shout them out. They can throw it in the chat box. But what are some life priorities in your 20s?
Maybe a house.
Okay, maybe a house,
Education.
education. Yep. College, enjoying life. Yep, love it. So a lot of it is it's early stages in building wealth, right? Income might be the lowest we've ever had it, highest probably in our life in our 20s, but the lowest within a career. Um, Life might be a little bit more simple during that time. But what I like to share is, someone in their 20s probably isn't really caring about retirement, right? They're thinking, what flavor of ramen noodles am I pulling out of the cabinet today? Right? It has nothing to do with all right, is my estate plan in place? Who am I going to transfer wealth to? Because a lot of people, it's not wealth. It might be student loan debt. It might be um, uh, we finally get our first paycheck, and what happens in your 20s? You go, all right, I want to move to a more expensive place. I want to finally get rid of that school car and get something more reliable, or I want to save for um, bachelor or bachelorette parties, and I want to travel, and whatever that might be. The priority probably isn't retirement planning. And then you get to your 30s, um, somewhat similar, but a lot of times I hear people say, gosh, right in my 20s, I'll definitely start saving when I'm in my 30s. And then 30s roll around, and some people might be starting family, raising kids. They might be doing a career change. They might be finishing up grad school. All these things stack up, and then I'll get to it in my 40s. And then now what's happening? We're busy with kids activities, and we're running people around, and life just never will settle down. And if you say I'll keep waiting, I'll keep waiting, it's always a different set of priorities moving forward. What about more mid-career, 40s and 50s? What are some priorities? So maybe we've graduated from the ramen noodles in our 40s and 50s now. And now what might be some priorities for some people?
Paying off your house,
Okay, paying off your house. Yep.
getting your kids
Insurance,
through college.
vacations, college. Yep.
Yeah, getting your kids through college. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of those priorities might still be personal, and then some of them might actually be influencing others around you. So this is definitely one of those. Yeah, young adult life for your kids. This is something to continue to focus on. Is over time our priorities change, but that doesn't mean that it's ever too soon to start planning, because remember, the plan is only going to empower what our life goals are. So this idea of retirement planning, it's really changed over time. Anyone ever seen this three-legged stool illustration before? Okay, this might even be in some of your textbooks, right? That you might share with students. So historically, there's this idea of retirement's a three-legged stool. You've got equal weighting between your savings, your Social Security, and your pension. Well, what's wrong about this stool now? Any ideas?
Very few pensions.
Yeah, very few pensions. Luckily, everyone on this call still gets that third leg, but um, yeah, historically, when you look at retirement, it's how are we going to pay for our expenses, right? We work our entire life creating, and we've got an income that we're earning, and then at some point where we either get too tired to work, or we're just done working, or we choose to do something different, we have to replace that income. So how do we do it? And yes, some people are fortunate enough to have a pension, guaranteed income source for the rest of their life. I believe Social Security will still be there. And savings is really that other piece that we lean on, right? So this is something I want to show here, is that there's really been a change in the retirement landscape. Okay. And so looking back to 1991, so if you see this first pie chart right on the top, kind of that three-legged stool, right? We have a third, a third, a third: savings, pension, Social Security. So now only 7.5% of company plans or pensions. So it used to be 85% of them were pensions in 1991. So see how much it's changed? And now it's more defined contribution. So let's back up. Defined benefit, meaning in retirement, you have a defined benefit, which is a defined income. But now it's defined contribution, right? Because you don't know what that amount's going to be in the future. It's how much are you contributing to it to determine that. So now look at 92.5% of company plans are now 401ks, 403bs. You are the one who are required to save on your own behalf. And back in 1991, only 14.5%. So things have changed. And so now when we are teaching and talking with others about what does this landscape look like with retirement, we need to be talking about all the different avenues here. So who knows time value of money? Show of hands. Who knows time value of money? Okay, we've got a few. And so when we are talking about this idea of time value of money, I like to tell people, let's just break that down, right? I know we're not English teachers here, but let's just break this down. My wife was an English teacher for a while, so I like to use this example. So time value of money, what does it mean? There's value in giving your money time. That's really it. That is all time value money is. And I like to break it down like that for students too, so then they can really see. Yeah, Matt, good point on there. Teaching this for the first time, it blows their mind like a magic trick. And I'll go through some calculations as well. But this idea that it isn't just saving, but it's saving and investing early and often. I find far too many people, I'll sit across the table from them and they say, I don't get it. I've been putting 10% of my paycheck away every single paycheck for years. And I've got hardly any growth on it. I don't understand this compounding interest thing. Where I looked and the money never even got invested, sitting in cash all those years. So making sure that it's actually invested is what's going to give us that compounding growth over time. So compounding interest. Anyone want to give us maybe a tidbit or an idea of this idea of compounding interest, or throw anything in the chat box? But what is compounding interest?
It's like a snowball. It adds, you're making money off of your money with interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Say if you invest $100 and you make 10% return, that's $10, right? Now, if you make another 10% return on 110, that's $11, right? So you made an extra dollar just by being invested. And that continues to snowball over time, right? 10% on $1,000 is much different than 10% on $100,000, right? That compounding growth as that continues to grow. You've got it like a snowball. Yeah, I love this, Julie. Patiently waiting for your money to work instead of the other way around. Exactly. So I like this statement too. And sometimes you just got to sit back and hear this twice. So the later you wait to save, the less time an investment grows, which requires more savings. Does that make sense? So this idea that later on you wait, it requires more money to be able to get your end result. So time value of money, your greatest wealth building tool you could possibly have. So here's a chart that I love showing here. So this shows an account over time of $200 a month being invested. Okay, so a few things to be looking at here is we've got 4 different investors. Okay, we've got our consistent investor. This is the person who's investing $200 a month for 40 years. And then we've got our early investor. This is someone, that gray line, that they're investing only for 10 years, but they're starting really early, age 25. And then we've got our late investor. So think about that. They invested for 30 years, but they didn't start until they were age 35. And then our last one is a consistent saver in cash, so not investing. So that was my example I said on that last slide. So as you can see here on there, the early and consistent investor has the best results. And the reason for that, compounding interest. You can see exactly over time, they invested $96,000. Okay, the same amount that the consistent saver in cash invested. But the difference, they actually had this invested in something more than money markets, CDs, cash in the bank. Right? It was actually working for them over time with an average 7% return. And so even though some of these, like for example, late investor, 30 years of investing is still not as much by age 65 as those who only invested for 10 years at age 25 and then stopped at age 35 and just let that compounding interest take its course. See the difference there? They invested 3 times as much and almost has the equal amount of wealth built up. So that shows early and often is what wins. Any thoughts or questions on this chart here? Yeah, pretty amazing. So I like showing this one. Another chart I like to show. So there's been a lot of studies out there for retirement planning and this idea of how much do I need to save? And there's a lot of rules out there that, there's a 3% rule, a 4% rule on how much you can pull out of a retirement plan safely. But what I like about this table is this helps you determine what is your income and what is your current age. And if you are investing moderately or moderate growth investing and you plan to retire at age 65, what savings rate of your income do you need to put away on an ongoing basis? So for example, if you make $50,000 and you're 35 years old, that number is probably closer to about 9-10% of your income because you still have plenty of time to be able to grow and replace that $50,000 income in retirement. So that's what this chart shows. I've got another one that shows for income earners over that 90,000, but I like showing this because it continues to hit on that concept of early and often. And if you wait later, it's going to require more, right? If we look at that $50,000 saver, where they would have been okay at 5% if they started at age 25, would have been closer to 24% of their income if they waited till age 50. So it requires a lot more by waiting rather than just letting it take its course and let compounding interest do its thing. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, love it. Okay, I've got a case study. So I would love to get as much involvement in this one as we can. Okay, so I'm curious, any UNK graduates on the call right now? Okay, I see a couple. I love it. So this one might hit home to you, it may not. But so our case study is we've got a recent graduate from University of Nebraska-Kearney. Okay, so she's 22 years old, and she's accepted her first job offer as a graphic designer for an advertising agency in downtown Omaha. Okay, so she's going to be making the move from Kearney to Omaha. Her offer is $54,000 of income, and her employer is offering a 5% match in her 401k plan. Okay, so it says dollar for dollar, we'll match up to 5%. So if you put in 1%, we'll match you 1. If you put in 5, we'll match you 5. If you put in 10, we'll give you 5, right? So up to 5%. And so she is considering investing 5% of her salary at some point in time to receive full company match. So now here's this term that a lot of us like. Who teaches economics? I'm curious. Okay, Econ 101, opportunity cost. What does that mean? Any thoughts? Opportunity cost. Feel free to unmute yourself, throw it in the chat box.
It's a trade-off.
Okay.
Like what you could do with that money instead of whatever. What you could do with that time instead of what you choose. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Who agrees with that? Yeah, trade-off. Yeah, and a lot of it, Jamie, I love what you said there. Here, the next best thing, right? What is that next best alternative? And it's relative because I talk about opportunity costs with clients all the time. If they say, should I pay off my car loan or keep my money where it's at? Like, well, it depends. Where's your money at? Is your money in the bank making nothing? Because if that's the case, then the next best thing is paying off that car loan. Is it in an investment that is outpacing the rate of return on that car loan? Then the next best alternative might be keeping it invested. Right? It really depends. What is the alternatives? What is that next best? So I love that. The trade-off, what's that next best alternative? Yeah, Matt, I love this. Your sister is a UNK graduate, graphic designer in Omaha. All right, here we go. I may be using her story here. We'll see. Um, so, some lifestyle factors here. Recent graduate, 22 years old, finally accepted that new job, $54,000 a year. These are some opportunity cost factors that I thought of, and I'd love to hear if there's any others that anyone else can think of. So, a few things that she's considering doing with her money and her time. Moving downtown Omaha to a higher cost apartment. She's been living with friends in Kearney, now trying to find a new place to stay. Should we be downtown by work? Should I go find roommates somewhere else? What are we going to do here? Upgrading her school car. So she had a car that she had from high school and she used it throughout college. And now she said, you know what? I've got my working income now. I think I can afford something nicer. I like to use this example. I've got an employee that she's 24 years old, and the amount of bachelorette parties that she goes to is insane. And they aren't just the hey, we get together for a couple hours and have drinks. It's we're booking to Nashville, we're booking to um, Daytona Beach, we're going to Las Vegas. Like, what in the world? Expensive. Okay, so bachelorette party invitations, saving for a home purchase someday, travel, potential part-time grad school, to try to buy up a little bit more income in her corporate job. What other lifestyle factors do you think would be coming up for a 20-something year old?
Maybe a wedding of her
Wedding.
own.
Yeah, a wedding could happen, right? Right, that costs money.
Yeah, student loan debt. There you go.
Student loan debt, yeah, paying student loans.
That grace period is about to end.
Yeah, that's right. So when you take a look at this, how does someone who's 22 years old, who lived at their college and went to school for the last 4 years, how do they make wise decisions with their money? Well, some of it starts with you, right? Teaching students some of this stuff. But some of the other pieces, let's keep talking about this idea of time value of money. Okay, so I've got a slide here and I'll walk you through it just so then you can see what's going on. So remember, she's 22 years old. And do you remember that I said she's considering putting 5% of her own money away? Well, let's go back to this right here. So this says a 25-year-old, so a little bit younger, at a $50,000 salary. So it's assuming 5% should help her make it, right? So now we're taking a look at the case study. So what I want to show here is this. She's putting away 10% total contribution. This is what we're considering. At what age is she going to start contributing 5% of her salary? 5% is her own money. 5% is her employer match. So together, 10% total contribution. Okay, we following there?
Mm-hmm.
We do the math, 10% per year would be about $450 a month from her income. $54,000 a year, 10% of that, 5,400, divide that by 12, $450 a month. Okay, and so then as you can see, all else is going to be equal. 10% contribution, retiring at age 65, 7% average rate of return. And I like to say average because that doesn't mean it's a guaranteed 7% every year. Some years, like for example, this year, the market is up 26% year to date. Last year, the market was up 24%. The year before that, down 20, right? So on average, trying to target about a 7%. And then see how we're following at this bottom column. Let's start on age 22. If she puts away 10% of total contribution, retires at age 65, total, she has put away $116,000. Her employers also put away $116,000. Okay. So her total contribution, 116. What do we think this has grown to by age 65? So she has put away 116, and her employers technically also put away 116,000 over all that time. How much do you think it'll be?
1.2 million.
1.2 million.
1.5.
1.5. About right on the nose there. 1.474. So yeah, you two are on it.
Good job, Jan.
Okay. So great. So if you just wait 10 years, okay, so age 22, we're going to bachelorette parties, we're buying up a nicer apartment downtown Omaha. Um, we are, maybe leasing or financing a newer vehicle. Um, we're trying to save up for a home or a wedding. So our money's going everywhere in our 20s, paying off student loans. So now we get to 32 and say, all right, finally, I'm ready to start putting money away. All else is still equal, right? Still putting away 450 total, 7% average rate of return, retired age 65. But now her total that she's put in is 89,000. How much do we think that this reduces to?
I'd say half, 700,000.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Half? Any other guesses? And what's crazy is that I forgot the number I even put in there, so it's going to be a surprise to me too. Okay, going from about 1.5, and just by waiting 10 years, 32. Can we agree 32 still young to start investing? I think so. Half, 700,000 just by waiting 10 years. Remember, we didn't take away 10 or half of the time we put money away. We didn't take away half of the contribution. See that? 90,000 to 116, but half of the value because we missed that first 10 years. Okay. 30s. Let's assume that our case study that she eventually got married, started having children, and life's expensive with children. If any of you have children, you probably can agree with that sentiment there. Finally, 42, we're finally figuring out, all right, let's start saving. All else is still equal, but now that total contribution is 62,000. What do we think that number is going to be? I cut right to it. Apologize. Cut in half again. 300,000. Remember, that value, the amount put away, did not cut in half. Only a portion of it did. Only 120 less payments. That's all it is. And then age 52, right? 40s, we're starting to pay for club baseball and, dance and whatever else takes parents' monies in their 40s. And try to do a family vacation to Disney that costs 30 grand for the whole family, whatever it might be, right? We're not investing till now age 52. That number goes from 306 to 113. Okay. So didn't change anything on a monthly basis, but just started at age 22, $1.5 million. Who agrees that $1.5 million? Yeah, it's good savings. Yeah, a few of us. Okay, so now I'm gonna spice this up a little bit. Okay. Let's assume now all else is equal, except the average rate of return is just 3% higher. Okay, so not just seven. I always like to tell people, let's average between 7 and 10. Okay, the general stock market, the S&P 500, depending on what case you look at, has averaged anywhere between 9.5% and 11% on average. If we look at the last 15 years, probably closer to 14. But let's just say overall history, we're going 10% average rate of return. Okay, can we agree that's probably a fair assumption? Could happen for a young person. So for age 22, so look here, add another column. Remember that 1.5 million we talked about? That's at 7% return. Now, if we got just 3%, not that much, just 3% increase, what do you think that 1.4 million is going to be instead?
2.5.
2.5? What other guesses do we have? It's a good guess.
I'm going to go a little less. 2.3.
Okay, 2.3. We'll give a minute for the chat. What else do we got? 2.1. Great guesses. Check this out. $3.9 million.
Wow.
Just 3% over doubles what we're working with here. That's the power of compounding interest. That's also the power of making sure that we know what is our time horizon that we're working with here. If we've got more than 10 years until retirement, it might pay to be in something more growth oriented. Because by saying, you know what, my comfortability, yes, I understand I'm young, but I'm gonna go with something a little bit more conservative versus something that might be more growth oriented and still diversified. That difference, if you look there, is what is that? Let's not get that wrong. $2.5 million difference at retirement. Huge. So that's 10%. Just being consistent. It's the same 450 that's put away, only 225 a month coming from that employee to do this at age 22. So now what do we think that reduces down to by just waiting 10 years? Just waiting 10 years. We know at 7% it was at six or almost 700,000. So we know it's going to be more than that. All right. 1.2. Okay. 1.2, 1.5. Yeah. You guys are right on the money there, right in between there, 1.2, 1.5. But remember, just 3%. This is only, what is that? A third of a more of more return there. It adds up, that compounding interest. And then age 42, almost 500,000. So look at this and how this has changed. So I just kind of revealed everything here. Age 52, look at the difference. 30 grand. When we're working with a time horizon of only 13 years, it's only a 30 grand difference. Hey, 30 grand's still a lot in retrospect of 100 grand, right? I mean, that's still a lot. But look at the difference of spread by giving it more time, compounding interest. 306 to almost 500,000. That's a much bigger spread. How about 700 to 1.4? That's a lot, right? That's double. And then over here, almost triple. So you can really see that starting early and telling students, hey, this is why we do it. We invest. If you don't know how to invest, work with a professional, help you invest. Talk to your parents if they invest. Be able to do this early and often, and it is going to pay dividends. And this isn't even putting into account, what if this person gets raises over their 40-year career and they're still putting in 5%? Remember, 5% on 50 grand is different than 5% on 60 grand or 70 grand in a career. It all adds up. This doesn't account for, if maybe she changes jobs and gets higher benefits packages. This doesn't include any wealth that might be built or inherited from somewhere else. It doesn't include a spouse in the in the equation at all. This is just 10% of her own salary. So it's amazing. Any questions on time, value, and money here? But yeah, these are great. If you haven't done it, I know that some teachers I talk to who teach time, value, money, they encourage their students, get a time, value, money calculator app on your phone. We go through these and we do it in class. Whatever I'll go present, I'll tell them, get out that calculator. Let's talk about this. Let's talk on why this is a wise thing to do. Okay. So now I want to just start maybe defining a little bit more of these terms we've already been talking about. So pensions, right, still used by some companies. I think some of you already mentioned that. A lot of it more governmental entities. Some of the big Fortune 500 companies still use them. And then military. That's essentially it. You don't see these anymore as often as we used to. We used to see almost every factory had them. Almost every corporation had them. Assuming if you worked for a business with more than 100 employees, you had a pension. It's not the case anymore. And even right now, I'm seeing a lot of companies, they're freezing their pensions and begging people to take a buyout out of them because they don't want them on the books anymore. But so if you work in a government job or military, your pension's probably very stable. It's probably one of the biggest income sources in retirement. So I like putting that Emperor's on there, just because I know a lot of you probably participate in this plan, and um, it takes pressure off of retirement savings, right? Because if you can provide some of your working income from a pension, pair that up with Social Security, you don't have to come up with as much from your own savings, right? That three-legged stool. If you've got a pension, it takes the relief off of how much you have to save early and often because you're going to replace that income. A lot of it's pre-tax, meaning that you get a deduction for putting money into it right now. So for those of you who are in the pension, right, you put 9.78% of your paycheck into it. It's mandatory, and you get a deduction for that. So, that's something to keep top of mind, meaning you get a deduction now. You do not have to pay taxes on it today, but in retirement, it comes out and you have to pay income taxes, just like your working income. Okay. Social Security. Curious, who thinks Social Security will still be there in the future? Any hands? Who thinks no way Social Security is going to be there? It's going broke. We won't see it a decade from now. Who thinks that? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is a very controversial topic. But I think a lot of people are sometimes confused on how, yeah, Matt, I think I agree with your sentiment there too. Something's probably got to change. They've talked about maybe 2034 will reduce benefits. They've talked about maybe the retirement age will go up from 67 to 70. And then there's been other ideas that says maybe, right now in the tax code, um, for those who make a high income, you only pay Social Security tax on up to $170,000. Anything above and beyond that, you avoid that tax. So people have talked about maybe raising that limit to try and generate more tax. But at the end of the day, when we look at our three biggest budget items as as a country, social programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Well, back when these were put into place in the late 30s, early 40s, we had 43 workers for one person claiming. Okay, 43 workers who are putting into the system for one person claiming. Today, we've got two workers to one claiming. So something might have to give at some point. But not here to share my philosophy on Social Security. But what I do want to share is really how that does affect retirement planning. So it's based on your highest 35 years of earnings. Okay. And so I'll have people all the time who are probably close to retirement age, and they say, should I keep working or should I retire? And it's, well, why are you making your decision? Well, gosh, I'm in my 60s and I feel like I should be retiring. Well, why? Do you like your job? Do you enjoy what you do? Because my idea of retirement is you're living the life you desire. If you love how you spend your time, keep doing it. And what's even good about that is if you're in your later working years, you probably are making a higher income than what you made 30 years earlier, right? We could probably agree with that. Every new year you add on to that earnings history bumps off a smaller year. So you can see that Social Security benefit increase just by working a few extra higher income years. So I like to share that based on 35 years of earnings. But look at that. It accounts for approximately 36% of the average person's retirement income. 36%. So it's important, right? And then I like to show this too. So right now, full retirement age is age 67. So that chart right on the right there, which that means is if you can claim as early as 62 and defer as late as 70. Okay. If you take it 62, you will get a 30% reduction in benefits. You'll get 70% of the full value. And that goes up incrementally up until age 67. Every year you wait, you get an 8% deferral credit up until age 70. I have some people say, I have to keep waiting if I don't need the income. No, take it. It's not going to increase any more than age 70. So just so you know, you can claim anywhere between 62 and 70. And I tend to see, depending on what your situation looks like, if you're someone who wants to have an early retirement because you've been teaching, You might take it earlier than later. Tax deferred versus Roth. These are ideas I like to share as well. Pre-tax, right? That's us talking about that tax deduction. You do not have to pay taxes on it today, but as that grows over time, we now have to pay tax in the future. You might see it called tax deferred. You might see it called pre-tax. You might see it called traditional, right? That is pre-tax money. And then this idea of Roth, what I call the seventh wonder of the world, or the eighth wonder of the world, right? Roth. So we do not pay, or you do pay income tax today. So you do not get a deduction by putting into Roth. And all that money will grow tax-free over time. And all of that, the principal plus all the growth comes out fully tax-free in the future. So an amazing way to save. And you can be saving through a variety of different ways. So one of which, 401k or 403b. This is something that I always like to remind students that 401k, that's what we hear a lot. 403b is an equivalent. 457b, that's an equivalent. 401a, that's an equivalent, right? So all those are different pieces are different provisions in the tax code. So all that means is 401k, that is in the Internal Revenue Code, section 401k is where you find the rules on that plan. And 403b, section 403b in the tax code. That's all those numbers mean. So 401k and 403b, a lot of your districts, you probably have the ability to contribute in a 403b if you wanted to put more in than what you're putting into your pension. So you can defer money from your paycheck on a tax deferred or a Roth. There's such thing as the Roth 403b or Roth 401k. It's not new. Almost every company has that Roth option now. Sponsored by your employer. I say in most cases there's a company match. A lot of your districts don't have a company match, but on the corporate side, a lot of the times there is. You can make up to $23,500 each year of the contribution if you're under 50. The additional $7,500 a year if you're above 50, and this is new as of 2025. An additional contribution if you're between 60 and 63. So just an idea for those who maybe are in more higher income and you're looking for ways to save, or you've got the means to do so. What an amazing tool to do it. Okay. And then pre-tax and Roth. There's also such thing as a Roth or traditional IRA, individual retirement account. Think of this as it's a retirement account that is outside of your employer. So it isn't necessarily sponsored by any employer plan. Some people move money to this after they've left an employer, but you can put $7,000 in it per year if you're under 50, $8,000 if you're over 50. That can be Roth or traditional. Remember, pre-tax, get the deduction today, pay the taxes in the future, or Roth, pay the tax today, and all that growth comes tax-free. So I like to use that example of our case study, right? If she was putting in, what do we say over time, $116,000, would you rather pay tax on $116,000 or pay tax on the 3.9 million? If you say, I'd rather pay tax on the 116,000, then go pre-tax, right? You get your deduction today, all that growth happens, and you pay tax on all that later on. But if you go, no, I'd rather have 3.8 million tax-free, then go that Roth option. And so that's a word that if your students can learn anything, Roth. When you hear Roth, make preference of it because it is a great tool. Okay. Roth conversions. I like sharing this because a lot of retirees, we talk about this idea of Roth and they go, well, what the heck? I wish I knew about this sooner. I say, well, you couldn't have learned about it too soon because it came out in 1997. So, I mean, it's what, 27 years old, not as long as people have been saving. Some people have been saving long before that. So there's a way that you can say, gosh, I like this idea of having all my growth be tax-free. How do I do it? Well, there's a thing called a Roth conversion. You can convert money from your pre-tax to Roth. But to do that, you have to pay tax on that pre-tax amount today. So if you say, hey, I want to move $10,000 from my pre-tax account to my Roth account, great, you got to pay tax on the $10,000. but now it's tax-free moving forward. So all the growth moving forward, fully tax-free. So it might be a good conversation for you. It may not be, but that is something that I like to share with people, that just because you haven't done Roth before or you chose to do pre-tax, that doesn't mean it's the end all be all. You can still make conversions over time if it makes sense for you and your family. Okay. And the caveat there is do as much as you're comfortable with. If you say, hey, I've got 100 grand I want to convert, great, you can do that. But you might have a $22,000 to $35,000 tax bill from that. So it's a strategy that takes time, and piece by piece. Don't all have to do it all at once. And then the last piece of retirement planning I wanted to hit on here is the idea of a health savings account. Who's ever heard of one of these before? Okay. So historically, what people do with this is if they are in the high deductible health plan with their employer, they go, great, I've got this HSA plan. Maybe your district puts a little bit of money in it for you, and you can contribute $4,300 as an individual, or if it's a family plan, you could do $8,550 a year. But what a lot of people do is they miss out on the benefit of this, because there's two benefits everybody knows, or most people know, and there's a third benefit that most people don't know. The first one is you get that deduction today, like a pre-tax account, right? So you benefit today on taxes, and it also comes out tax-free. So like the Roth. So that's double tax benefit. But what did we miss here is the growth, tax-free growth over time. I have too many people, they put money in these, and then they get the debit card, and then when health expenses come, they swipe the card, they spend the money there. But remember, there's no requirement to spend the money out of this anytime soon, which is different than like the flexible spending account that you do have to spend by the end of the year. This one can roll over. You can also invest it to get tax-free growth over time. I have some people, what they do when they have health expenses, they keep the receipts, right? They scan them in, and they continue maxing these accounts out over time and building this tax-free wealth and letting it grow over time. And in retirement, you can now take distributions out for healthcare expenses. But here's the kicker. If you saved those receipts, you had healthcare expenses. You're just reimbursing yourself now for them. So you can stack expenses over decades if you want. And we've got some people that, over the years, they have tens of thousands of dollars of expenses. And so it's just another tax-free place for you to take money out. So, and if you don't have the means to keep saving it there and you got to spend it, spend it. I mean, you still got the tax deduction and tax-free coming out, but it's that middle piece, that tax-free growth in the middle that a lot of people miss. So highly encourage people to consider that as well.
So my question on the HSAs,
Yeah, you bet.
is that is that a financial planner? Can you do that through a financial planner, or is that only through your employment?
It depends. Some of your districts require it to go through a certain vendor for that plan. And if that's the case, you'll just want to check and see. A lot of those companies you are able to invest. If your district says, no, we've got an agreement, we only do it with the local bank, you may not be able to invest it. But yeah, some of your financial advisors may be able to do HSAs, but if not, there's a lot of companies out there that will allow you to invest that HSA. So if not, I would ask, am I able to open up an HSA elsewhere and see what they say? But
Okay.
most employers now allow you to either choose your own HSA, or they provide one that's versatile enough that you can invest it.
Okay.
But great question.
Thank you.
What other questions? I know that, we've got just a little bit of time left, and I talked a lot, but want to just see, we talked through a lot of content. Any questions, feedback, thoughts, any tidbits that maybe I missed that you wanted to share for peers?
I have a question if nobody else is going to.
Yeah, Matt.
As an industry, the retirement planning, financial planning industry, are groups, firms, whatever, starting to see more people pushing retirement back later, or are people retiring earlier? Like, what's the trend with actual ages? Since you brought up the Social Security, like,
Yeah, I'll tell you what, those who are already in their 60s, I tend to see it's being pushed out later. Um, I I think right now I'd still say the average age is probably 65, because I see people anywhere between 55 and 75 is probably the sweet spot for retirement. A lot of factors. I mean, if you're military, I mean, gosh, that can be as early as 40. If you are in education, that can be as early as 55, right? So there's a lot of options out there. Um, and anymore, it's at the end of the day, what is um, what is your goal? How do you live the life you desire? If you are 75 years old and you love what you do, keep working. No need to pivot just because of an age constraint. Do what fulfills you on a daily basis, and if work is a part of that, awesome. What I encourage a lot more for people is this idea of semi-retirement. Is this idea of, one, do you love what you do? If you do, awesome, keep at it. But if you go, it's a job, it's okay, then I encourage people to say, let's really think through what is it that would be life-giving for you, and let's pivot. Even if it means you make less money, even if it means you work less hours, can we swing this utilizing resources that you've saved to be able to help you live the life you desire? So this next half of your life, right? Retirement, I like to call halftime. This next half of your life, we're not still just in the trenches. We're pursuing significance at this point instead. All right, Julie, you asked a question. Are people waiting to retire because of the high cost of insurance? Sometimes. It really depends. Um, it depends on a lot of factors. So a lot of you might know, like I didn't share this in here, the idea of Medicare, right? Medicare starts at age 65 for health coverage. So a lot of people do wait until 65 because it's just a natural time to do it. They say, you know what, I'm kind of right at that median age. Social, I'm right in the middle of being able to claim Social Security. Oh, and Medicare works, so I can leave my employer health plan. A lot of your districts allow you to stay on your health plan after you retire. You do have to pay the full premium, so it might be $700 or $800 a month, but you still get that option. And sometimes it's still cheaper than going through the marketplace with much better coverage through that Educators Health Alliance plan. So a lot of you do have options. And some companies, like I see some people who work for insurance companies, big ones in Lincoln would be like Emeritus and Assurity. But like Emeritus employees, if they work there long enough, their company will pay for health insurance as early as if you retire at 55 and keep you on until Medicare. So some corporations do that, but a lot don't. A lot of people, it's at 65 because of insurance. But I like to tell people, don't cross retirement off your mind or off your list because of that age restraint. Talk with a professional, walk through and see, is it possible? Because it might be. But great question, Julie. What other thoughts or questions? Yeah, Julie, thanks for sharing that too. Julie, were you on one of my other presentations before? I might have recognized this comment here, but yeah, and your situation does depend. Yeah, it always just depends. Making sure if you do use a trust for estate planning, make sure it's written correctly. Making sure you've got the right fiduciaries, people you trust on there. But yeah, gosh, that's tough on there when there's a large amount of cost on there. But yeah, always make sure you do something that makes sense for you and your family. Absolutely. Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
One question I feel like I always have
Yeah.
once we talk about investing and how exciting it is to start young and time value of money, then the kids are like, well, where do I go? How do I do that? What's the best answer?
See, it's really hard because I hate to just say, oh, go talk to this person, or oh, go do this.
Right.
I always like to say first, do you know if your parents are savvy and wise with money? I always start with that question because um, there's some like I was a kid when I was a high school kid, my parents were not savvy with money. And I had no idea what a financial advisor was. I had no idea what investments were. I learned it all in my personal finance class in high school. So that's where I learned a lot of this. Um, but if they say yes, they are. I know they've got a financial advisor, or yes, I know that they're going to say, talk to your parents. Do that if you know that they're wise. If they're not, um, a lot of times you get a great opportunity when you start working that first job in a 401k, or ask around and find a professional that you can trust. Um, and it depends on location, depends on a lot of things, right? Because I like to share with people, I may not be the best advisor for everyone. Actually, I know I'm not the best advisor for everyone. There are people who are not a good fit for me, and I understand that. The 200,000 other advisors in the United States, they're not the best fit for everyone either. So it's personal. Finance is personal. Making sure you find someone you trust. And if you trust someone, great, make that recommendation. But if they're savvy enough, they can go online and literally Google, how do I open up a Roth IRA? There's a lot of avenues on there to open up an account. But, they've got to be savvy to know what type of account do I open? What type of investments do I put it in to make sure it's growing? How do I make sure I don't get myself into any trouble on this? So, might be able to gauge it. But I always like to say, start with your parents, start with an adult you trust. If they are savvy with this, ask them. If they're not, maybe use your search engines to find something different, or if you've got a family friend or someone locally.
And I just put the
Great
link in there
question.
too. You can always check your financial advisors as well.
Yeah.
And FINRA helps with that. So that's something too. I know the Department of Banking and Finance and all those people will suggest, if you're working with somebody and you're a little bit on the edge, like, is this person really a financial advisor? You can always check. Brett
Yep.
has all those letters after his name for a reason. And so he worked very hard to get those. So make sure that you're checking to make sure that your person, is actually a financial advisor, has the correct.
Yeah. Matt, good point, because that is one thing is there are a lot of those who hold themselves out to be financial advisors. And before you know it, you sign a lot of paperwork, put a lot of money away, and you've actually been funding life insurance, not an investment. It's different. Great use for life insurance, right? That's a part of a plan. It's not a primary investment though. So, so those are things to make sure. That's why I mentioned the CFP, Certified Financial Planner. That's a place to look. I will link real quick. Um, I'm gonna actually stop my share real quick just so then I can send something over in here. I'll link one more thing here. Here we go. This is a good link to look to. Let's make a plan.org. That's really just to find a CFP near me, is really all that is. What's nice about those who are certified financial planners, they have a lot of requirements. They have to have a college degree. They have to go through graduate level coursework in financial planning. They have to take a large board exam. They have to adhere to ethics requirements. They have to do continuing education on an annual basis. All of that stuff is above and beyond just being licensed to do investments. So sometimes that's a nice place to go, just to be able to help further verify that you're working with someone who is working in your best interest.
All right. I'm going to stop recording here.